Yeah, there's a little test you can, but we'll get to that in a minute. That was just a, okay, I got the...
So which part is supposed to be pre-test and which...
It was a pre-test, I will do a post-test.
Is that this one right here? Is that what we're supposed to do?
The evangelism styles questionnaire. You'll have a, we'll kind of get started, then we'll do it. That was just if you came early, you could kind of be working on it. Okay, we got the video recorder going. The video recorder, that sounds like 1980s. Although we did watch Donnie and Marie this morning on YouTube. We're like, man, we haven't seen that thing for 100 years. But that's beside the point. I had some people say, hey, could you record this thing? Because schedules aren't always conducive to this moment. So here we are. And I have the different microphone. I don't have the one that I have, like my little lapel one. I can't find that. Anyway, so hopefully I'll have to speak up so make it sure it picks up well enough for the video. So testimonies. We're talking about testimonies. This all stemmed from our homeless ministry where we go into the camps and feed people. And someone was like, hey, why don't you do a service out here? We thought, yeah, that'd be great. And then we thought, well, what do you do for a service for for homeless? You're thinking through all the formalities. We need the band. We need, well, we don't need all that. But it was like maybe they don't need like a structured sermon. That people, they need the stories, right? So it's like, well, how about we just start with training on how to tell a story? And that often intimidates people. You think, well, I don't want to go up to people and tell them my story. It's what if they push back? What if they don't like it? What if they disagree? Whatever. And you think of maybe the guy you see on TV who's really flashy, or maybe you've been with someone who just tells the story and everybody falls at their feet and says, oh, this is great. I'm going to become a Christian right now. And you think, well, I'm not that. And that's true. You're not. You're you. So we're going to talk about you a little bit. And so that's the start of this first part. I was going to set my timer, but my timer is also recording me, so I don't have a way to set set it for 1 hour. I promised I'd keep this at 1 hour. I didn't think that through. So let's go through some key components of relational evangelism, because I'm a big believer in relational evangelism as opposed to just the cold, knock on someone's door and say, hey, do you believe in Jesus? And that doesn't really seem to be a super effective way. You can crunch numbers, X% will respond, but if you want to really build a disciple, which is what Jesus called us to do, you want to start with a relationship. So relational evangelism, I think, is the way to go. The first, there's some key components here. Was there 6? I think I changed it on the actual outline, so it said 4. Well, 7. 7.
Oh, it continues.
See, we're already confused. 7. Number 1 is it's authentic. Effective evangelism just flows out of a genuine living relationship with Christ. It's your faith you're sharing with someone that you know. And they know you, they've seen your faith demonstrated, so it's an authentic thing. By the way, this is the Reader's Digest version of like a 4-week class I used to do periodically, but I kind of haven't done it for quite a while. So I haven't even looked at this for a long time except for this week. Number 2 is natural. Instead of trying to be something we're not, like, oh, I've got to be this super evangelist tele guy or of the fast car and 7 sermons or something. You're just you. So it's natural, relational evangelism reflects your own personality rather than trying to be somebody else. Number 3, it's personal. It's not a pamphlet. It's not a billboard. It's not a canned speech. It's a personal between you and that person. Number 4, it is verbal. We actually talked about this recently on Sunday morning, Romans 10:14. How can they believe in the one whom they have not heard? How can they hear without someone preaching to them? You can do all the nice things you want, wear all the great t-shirts, be the great example, and that's all important, but words are important. Words without actions are empty, but so are actions without words. The whole thing we're doing with the homeless camps is all about building relationships. We've been talking about that if you've been involved with that, that's why we have the tables, that's why we have chairs, that's why we sit down and have conversations. It's not just handing them something and moving to the next person. It's getting to know people. You know, not your best friend or anything, but you're getting to know each other. Over time now, they've begun to trust us, accept us, look forward to us. Not just because they're getting a freebie, but they're getting a conversation too. We're having a relationship with folks, and that's why they last time say, "Hey, come out and do a service." You know, they don't say that to anybody else who just shows up on a whim. So it's stemming from relationship and being verbal. Number 5 is process oriented. It's not pushy. There's no rush. You're not trying to close the sale at that moment or anything. It takes time to understand and believe the message. If you're telling someone the gospel, rarely, I mean, I've never in my life have had someone hear it the first time and I go, "Oh yes, I'm in." You know, they have to process it and think about it and just let it cook. Especially in today's world when they've been taught so many things that are different, that it just takes a process. Number 6, it's team oriented. God rarely uses just one person to bring someone to faith. He often brings a number of people together to do things, so to get to that goal. When we go to Africa, what makes it so effective there, every time we come back, there's all these people who have given their lives to Christ, there's all these baptisms and everything. I'd like to say it's because we're just a fantastic team, and we take great teams there, but it's really because there's 29 schools with 22,000 students going to these schools, mission schools, and there are churches in all the schools, and there's other teams that go and do VBS and stuff. So there's thousands of people being fed little seeds of the gospel regularly through the schools, through the churches, through the medical outreach they have. And we happen to show up, and while there's been a lot of seeds planted and a lot of watering done, sometimes we go and harvest. Other teams come and harvest as well. But it's all because multiple people have reached into their lives, maybe a teacher, maybe a preacher, maybe a neighbor, maybe someone else in the church. And so it's just a team. It's just, with me, it was a team bringing me to Christ. My mom was influential. My Sunday school teacher was influential. The preacher next door was influential. The little bits and pieces from all of them, suddenly the light bulb turns on and it works. So that's the whole idea of it being a team oriented. All right, 2 implications to the team effort. Number 1, we do not individually carry the full burden of leading people to Christ. So, you know, if you go out, "Hey, we're going soul winning," that used to be a big thing back in the day. And if you came back without winning souls, it's not that you're a failure. You know, it's that you don't carry the whole burden. There's other people involved. Maybe God used you to plant. Maybe God used you to water. You don't know. They still have to decide on their own. So it's not on you wholly. And number 2 is strategic, to intentionally partner with other Christians to lead people to Christ. So we're doing this together. We go to the home. I'm going to use that example because that's what we do so much regularly. You know, we got some people grilling, some people serving, some people going to the store. We got some people doing all kinds of different things. So there's all kinds of different pieces of the process going on that together we work together as a team. And number 7, we're on number 7 of our 7 components of relational evangelism. Number 7, it puts others first. If we want to win people's trust, we need to put that person first. They need to know that you actually care about them as a person. That it's not a notch in the belt. It's not about you. It's not, you get to know them. You know, their interests, their hobbies, their hurts, their victories, their everything. You know, it's all about getting to know them. Listen to their opinions before you give theirs. Before you give yours, take an interest in their background, their story. When we went, one of the first times we went into the camps, I'd never gone to a homeless camp, right? I mean, I don't know, it was always kind of intimidating or something. It's like, oh, you know, what are they going to do, you know? And so I'm just kind of following Richard around, but I'm just observing. I'm looking around, and I'm looking down and think, man, there's some really beat up pots and pans that they just had sitting by the campfire. And I thought, we happened to just buy some new pans like after 20 years, or 40. however, I don't know how however long we had those other ones. And so I had this pile of pans I was going to get rid of them. I thought, hey, just throw them away. So I probably had them sitting around for a week, and I thought, well, man, these people could use these pans. And we kind of stumbled onto that. We brought them next time, and people, they went, man, they were just gone. And so I started telling people, hey, if you have old pans, bring them. They use them because they probably got the other ones out of a garbage can or something, and that's what they were using. It never would have occurred to me other than pausing to observe what's going on in their camp, in their world. I wasn't there just to say, hey, you need to cook on better cookware. I was here to say what's going on in your life, and just through observing. So that's the idea of putting others first, get to know them, their issues, their needs. So it's relational. I'm talking about relational sharing of your faith, relational giving your story. One thing we've done here for a long time, you'll hear me refer to this periodically, a pathway is to have a top 5 list. Oh, I meant to bring my little cards in. I print some freshmen. I didn't. But you have a piece of paper here. We should always have people, the encouragement is to always have 5 people in your world that you rub shoulders with. Maybe not every day, but you know who they are. You associate with them in some way. It's not like someone over in Cayman Islands or something, but someone here that you rub shoulders with, that you're praying for on a regular basis, that they're not connected to Jesus, not connected to a church, whatever. They just need Jesus. And just be praying for them regularly. And that's what that top 5 is all about. Keep a top 5 list. It's just you're praying for them, and that keeps you focused. It's what cultivates the ground. If we're going to use the soil parable of Jesus and the sower, it prepares their hearts, your heart, and everything. So there's things to pray for. If you're like, I don't know what to pray about, well, you pray for them. So this next part of your outline is pray that God would pull them toward Him. Pray that God would open their eyes to the emptiness of life without Him. And we all felt that, and we don't necessarily know what that is until we realize, oh, that's that God-shaped hole, all right? Pray for them to help them see their need for forgiveness, like we all have, to remove the confusion they have about Him. There's all kinds of bad information out there about who God is and the Christian life, and it's like just to see clearly. Help them grasp the meaning and importance of the cross of Christ. Open the person's heart to God's love and truth. So that's just some ideas of things to pray for someone who's outside of Christ. You can pray for you. That is help you live a consistent and attractive Christian life. I mean, none of us are perfect. None of us are, do everything perfect all the time. But just pray for your consistency, that people could look at your life and kind of like... where were we in Romans, where Paul was talking about, is it 12 or 13:12? That the idea of the Christian life being an issue of jealousy for the Jewish nation, that they would say, man, look what God's doing with them. And I wish He was doing that with us. That we're creating a jealousy, almost, I want what you have, type of thing. That's the consistent, attractive Christian life. Don't fake it, but it's got to be real. That's why you're praying about it. Make you authentic and honest as you deal with life's ups and downs. Because we all have ups and downs, and you're just going through life like everybody else. I'll give you wisdom and knowing how to approach the relationship that you have with these 5 people. Expand your knowledge, so be ready to define and explain the Gospels. That's usually our biggest thing is I'm not an expert. I don't know what if I say it wrong. Well, just pray about it. Pray that God will give you the words. Grant you appropriate boldness and courage. That's usually what really it boils down to. I'm scared, and everybody is. Courage. Use you to help lead this person to a relationship with Christ. And then you're going to pray for us. That's me and the people together that cause depth and trust to grow in the relationship, open doors for spiritual conversations, guide the conversations in place, frequency, and content. So, those are honestly... You could have 2 lists going. Like I say, we go to the homeless camps every 2 weeks. You could find 5 people within the homeless camps and put those names down in addition to the 5 you have in your regular world. And those are good things to be praying about, even generically, for the homeless camps. That, man, build a real relationship. I'm terrible with names. I'll hear a name, and it takes me about 19 times before it finally sticks. And so like I remember the face, like I immediately, like, I know you. There was someone at church this past week, and I'm like, man, I know who you are. And they're like, well, it's been like a year, and we were here like a year ago. Oh, okay. At least I figured out in my mental Rolodex, so why do I know you? It's from Kiwanis, from a chamber, all the different things I do. There's a note, they'd been here, and they had brought a couple friends with them. I'm like, oh, well, good to see you. What was my point there? I don't know. My mind drifted. But that's a good thing to pray for. Good thing to pray for. All right, so you have this little test. You got too many pieces of paper in front of you. And this is just a personality. There's no right or wrong. There's answers on the second sheet. So you can just, the numbers in that chart are obviously would correspond to the numbers on your sheet of paper. If you want to just flip through that, I'll give you a couple minutes here to work that. Everybody wrapping up? Ish, close enough. So basically this is just you already know you, but sometimes it's good to have a little more identifying help. On the columns on your answer sheet, these are kind of personality, I guess it's personality types. A is that the confrontational, it's a style, more like some of you are more the confrontational. We'll kind of break these down. B is intellectual. C is testimonial. D is interpersonal. E is invitational. F is serving. So the rest of these sheets kind of go through these confrontational. I should have labeled them A on the other sheet, but I did the little chart later. Anyway, confrontational, biblical example, you think of Peter. Peter was the in-your-face guy. He's the guy who pulls out a sword and chops off the dude's ear. He's the guy who jumps in the boat, out of the boat and into the water. He's the guy who jumps up on the day of Pentecost and preaches and calls them all murderers. He'd be the confrontational type person. Yeah. So some of you, that's your go-to. That's just how you're wired. That's how God made you. Characteristics: confident, assertive, direct, bold, skips the small talk, gets straight to the point, strong opinions and convictions. That's not good or bad. It's just who you are. It's how you're wired. Some cautions on that is be sure to use tact when confronting people, which you do always, right?
Always.
Every time. Use tact when confronting people with truth to keep them from becoming unnecessarily offended. Allow the Holy Spirit to restrain your desire to come on strong in every situation. Sometimes you need to come on strong, but sometimes maybe you don't. Ask the Holy Spirit for wisdom there. Avoid judging or laying guilt trips on others who approach evangelism with different style. That's often, over the years, people I know that have this characteristic, this style, tend to look down on other people who don't have it, because it's just like, you just say it, you just tell them, you just punch them in the face. Why wouldn't you do that? And the other people are like, I can't. So you got to be careful there. Second was intellectual. Biblical example would be like the Apostle Paul. I mean, like we're going through Romans. Sometimes got to read those paragraphs 3 times. Like, I don't even know what you just said there, dude. He's all over the place. And some people are just analytical and scientific and parsing Greek and all the stuff. Characteristics: inquisitive, analytical, logical, likes to debate, likes to ask questions, more concerned with what people think than what they feel. So they're going to, get into information, and that's not good or bad either. That's how you're wired. Your cautions. Just made me think. A few years ago, the National Atheist Convention was in town, and so we rented a room at the Embassy Club, or whatever it is, Embassy downtown, the Embassy, whatever the hotel. And it was a prayer room. We didn't go to talk, we didn't go to debate, we didn't go to, flaunt Bibles, throw Bibles at people. We just went and prayed. There was another group out there that was there to debate. So they held signs and yelled and ridiculed and called them names, and they were, it was just, they were the intellectuals. Like, we're going to debate you on all this stuff. We'll debate evolution. We'll debate, whatever, any topic. And both sides felt pretty good about themselves, thinking that they won the debate. Now, since we were on the inside, they assumed we were one of them. Like, we're eating breakfast and listening to the conversations around us, and they just thought it was hilarious what the intellectuals were doing out on the street corner. They were just toying. They were toying with each other. Not knowing, they thought they were making scoring points, but they came prepared, because in any town they go to have these conventions that travels around, there's always the intellectuals, there's always the confrontational, and there's people up there praying too, but they don't know about. But anyway, it was just kind of interesting for me to from an inside perspective, see that, because they assumed, like I said, we were one of them. Number 3 is testimonial. Biblical example, the blind man who was healed by Jesus. If you remember, he's called aside. They're quizzing him like, this guy's a sinner. Jesus is a sinner. What are you doing mess with him? And he says, well, whether he's a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind and now I see. It's a testimonial. It's like, I can't debate if he's a sinner or not. I can't be intellectual. I'm not confrontational. The blind guy goes, all I can tell you is what happened. I was blind, now I see. Everybody has a story. And that's what I love about the testimony, is nobody can argue your story, because it's your story. It's what God did in your life. They can argue doctrine, they can argue all kinds of stuff, all the science stuff. They can argue all kinds of things, but they can't argue that. Characteristics: clear communicator. You're maybe a storyteller. Well, that's what it says, storyteller. A good listener, able to relate their experience to others, overwhelmed by the account of how God reached them. Cautions: beware of talking about yourself but not relating your experience to the other person. So if you're just talking about you, at some point that gets boring. The good listener is, I need to know how does my story relate to you? Why would you care? But that comes natural to a good storyteller, but sometimes it's a skill that needs to be honed. First, you need to listen to them, be able to connect your story to their situation. Do not stop with merely telling your story. Challenge them to consider how what you have learned might apply to their life. Avoid downplaying the value of your story because it seems too ordinary. The ordinary story is the kind that relates best to ordinary people. I know I've talked with our daughters in the past, and they grew up in the church, and they just, neither one of them ever went through like a rebellion time. You could look at them and say, man, you're just kind of a boring life. They think they have a boring story. I think, man, you have a fantastic story. I was really kind of that way too from 4th grade on. It's like, I was saved from all kinds of stuff that my friends were doing. I just didn't make those mistakes because I had direction. That's part of the story is I don't know, there's just, it's a valuable story. Whatever your story is, it's valuable. Either God saved you out of sin, or we saved all of us out of sin, but also God saved you from doing some pretty big mistakes in your life that would have led to some pretty big heartache. Either way, the story is powerful. So don't downplay your own story. 4 is interpersonal. Interpersonal, that was D. Matthew. When Jesus called him into discipleship, what's the first thing he did? He had a big party. He's like, man, I'm a tax collector. I got a bunch of tax collector friends. How about if I throw a party and we'll invite Jesus and we'll all just kind of interact together. Matthew parties are pretty cool. We've been invited to families before. They had big family things, and they'd call us like, come on. And I'm like, why do you want me there for? I'm not your family. And they're like, oh, it'd be... Anyway, it's just kind of a cool thing. It was a way for them to introduce their family to the church, at least, and to Jesus somehow, and then we became great friends. But that's just a interpersonal way. Characteristics: warm personality, conversational, friendship-oriented. That's kind of what we're doing naturally through the homeless thing. We're just a bunch of Christians who show up and we're sitting down at a table and we're feeding them and talking. It's just interpersonal, right? Focus on people, their needs, more on ideas. We haven't gone there to debate. We're not there to hit people, like I said, over the head with Bibles. We're just there. If they have a question, we'll answer it. If they have a prayer request, we'll pray with them. this is really all about equipping ourselves to be able to maybe tell our story better, which we'll get to really quick. Don't get overwhelmed by the needs your friends might have. Leave room for God. You know what? Sometimes it's hard because we're leaving. We go into these homeless camps. We're meeting people for an hour or two, and then we get into our air-conditioned car if it's hot, or heated car if it's cold, and you just think, man, they're going into a tent that's like hot or cold, or I don't know. We gave them some food, so hopefully they'll have food tomorrow. We don't know if they'll have it on Wednesday, what they're going to eat. It's all these things. Man, we've seen people crumpled up in pain. We're like, what happened to her when we left? What's it called, a sciatic nerve or something? She has nerve issues. Sometimes we'll see her, she's walking. Sometimes she can barely, or she can't even stand. It's just like, they need help. They need things. But you can't do it all. So don't let it overwhelm you. You do what you can. We're giving our encouragement. We're giving some food. We can do that. We can do a meal today and give you some food for tomorrow, and make sure you have clothing, blankets, whatever you need. But we can't do it all. So don't be overwhelmed. Number 5 is the invitational. That's the letter E. Biblical example: woman at the well. Samaritan woman. Jesus meets her. They have a great conversation. And she goes into the city and says, come see a man who told me everything I've ever done. She invited the whole city, and the whole city came out, to see Jesus. It's hospitable, the characteristics: relational, persuasive, enjoys meeting new people. That's all part of the invitational style. Cautions: be careful not to always let others do the talking for them. Be careful not to always let others do the talking for you. You're inviting, but you can also speak. So come and hear Jesus. It's like, well, I can tell the story too. So just don't always, delegate the story. Carefully, prayerfully consider which events or church services you take people to. I hope that makes sense. You got someone who's like teetering on Jesus, let's take it to the tithing lesson. It's like, well, that's kind of like, that doesn't really apply to me. There's another Jesus in that. Don't get discouraged if people refuse your invitation. Their refusal could be an opportunity for spiritual conversation. Also, their no today may be a yes tomorrow. It's all in process, 6 was serving. Biblical example: Dorcas. If you've never heard the story of her, she's a woman who made all kinds of clothing for people, and she died. Are you laughing at her name?
I don't know how to spell it.
Dorcus. I always think it's funny when churches
spell it like that.
Yeah, it's funny. The churches have all the Dorcas circled. I'm always like, come on. I mean, we know what that means if you read the story, but Dorcas. Anyway, she passed away, and everybody was very sad, and they called for Peter, and he came out, and just her story went to the whole community. She was such a servant, she just helped people, and she just did so much for so many people that there was a big vacuum when she passed away. And so that's the idea there. Characteristics are other-centered, humble, patient, sees the needs, finds joy in meeting those needs, attaches value to even menial tasks, less vocal. She wasn't out there preaching on the street corner, but she was making clothes for the person who needed them. Cautions: just as words are no substitutes for actions, actions are no substitutes for words. You still got to say something. Make sure to point folks to the central motivation for your acts of service. That I get awkward on that. I'll never really everybody knows at the homeless camp who we are. So we don't have to say, every 4 seconds, we're here because of Jesus. It's like they know. But you can say, hey, can you pray? Or sometimes people ask us, would you pray for me? Then that's a way. So it's a way to tactfully do it without being weird. Because I've seen it done weird too. And even I feel awkward, It's like, here in the name of Jesus, take the bottle of water. It's like, can you just give me a bottle of water? But you got to say something too. So that's maybe a personality thing too. And I'm weird enough. I try not to add weirdness. Make sure, I said that, do not underestimate the value of your service. This style will reach some of the most negative, hardened people. Acts of loving service are hard to resist and difficult to argue with. And you know what? We just keep showing up with food. It's 100 degrees out and people are fainting and going to the hospital and you're over there grilling, almost fainting. But we keep coming back. We do it because we want to. We want to feed people. I mean, there's no brownie points for us. We're not, it's literally nothing in it for us. We go home and sleep for 2 hours afterwards because we're just exhausted. And then in a few weeks, it's going to be super, super cold, and we'll still be marching around through the snow, getting in the tents, trying to get people food because we want to. So it's legit. It's real, and you can have the strongest Jesus hater there and say, "Oh man, nobody else is coming and giving me food like this." I mean, we're not a program. There's no big name to our thing. We're just people who love Jesus and love people. So that speaks a lot. Be discerning as to how much you can do realistically without depriving yourself or your family of needed care and attention. So that's it too. I mean, you can get so wrapped up that you neglect your own needs. It's like when the airplane, make sure you get your oxygen first, then you can help the person next to you. If you're passed out, you can't do much of anything. So lots of little stories on that. So, all right. That was just, I know that's all foundational. That's half our time or more. But the whole idea is you tell your story.
25 minutes and 12 seconds left.
Okay, perfect. Because the rest of it is like, I can't tell your story, right? I mean, it's your story, but you want to think it and process it through. And we go through this part because it's, have a good grasp on your personality, Don't be like, I've got to be Billy Graham, and so I'm going to try to tell my story like Billy Graham would tell it. No, you tell the story how you would. Billy Graham's kind of that's an old name now, but who's the big evangelist these days? I don't know. We don't really have any out there. Don't try to be some TV preacher. Don't try to be somebody you knew from your childhood that's still really good of going into a strange place and converting everyone to Jesus. You be you. If you're an intellectual, be an intellectual. If you're confrontational, use it well. That's the whole point. Is at least know who you are, so you filter that through what your story is. Your story is hard to argue. Like I said, they can argue doctrine. They can argue. I'm part of a group that's just filled with atheists and on Facebook and LTGB community. I don't remember all the letters, but a lot of anti-Christian people, But I don't remember what point was there. My mind went to all these little memes they share on there. I might not even win some of the arguments if I try to argue with them, because I'm not the intellectual. But they can't argue with my story.
Trust me, it doesn't make any difference, even if you are trying to.
Exactly. That's why I don't even engage. It's just like, you're just fighting. You're not even.
I got kicked out of the men's right movement group for being intellectual.
We don't want none of that. We don't want no intellectuals. We ain't got time for that.
Apparently they get really pissed off when you say, you guys are sounding like a bunch of feminists now organization.
We're men. Chuck Swindoll said, the skeptic may deny your doctrine or attack your church, but he cannot honestly ignore the fact that your life has been changed, right? That's big. So, how to organize your story. The Apostle Paul in Acts 26 basically is the pattern that we use. There's three components, and we look at his components that he gave, and we do the same thing. We just interject our story, not his story. Component one is Paul's life before Christ. You're going to look at your life before Jesus. And if you read this text, you can sit down and read it in like a minute or two. I mean, it's not like a big 45-minute presentation. Paul's just talking to Agrippa. Verse 4, the Jews all know by the way I've lived ever since I was a child, from the beginning of my life, in my own country, and also in Jerusalem. They've known me for a long time and can testify. They are willing that according to the strictest sect of our religion, I lived as a Pharisee. Now it's because of my hope in God in what God has promised our fathers when I am on trial today. This is the promise our 12 tribes are hoping to see fulfilled as they earnestly serve God. I got to make so I can see this. Day and night. O King, it's because of this hope that the Jews are accusing me. Why should any of you consider it incredible that God raises the dead? I too was convinced that I ought to do all that was possible to oppose the name of Jesus of Nazareth. And that is just what I did in Jerusalem. On the authority of the chief priests, I put many of the saints in prison. When they were put to death, I cast my vote against them. Many a time I went from one synagogue to another to have them punished, and I tried to force them to blaspheme. In my obsession against them, I even went to foreign cities to persecute them. So he's telling a story. This is what I was before Jesus. A really good Jewish person. I mean, he was an intellectual. He was on the track to be a Pharisee. He was to be, high up there. He was all the best, all the stuff, right? He opposed the teachings of Christ. He put Christians to death. That's just story. That's just what he did. That's how I was before I met Jesus. The second component is his conversion. That'll be our second component. How did Christ get into your life? On verse 12 of Acts 26, on one of these journeys I was going to Damascus with the authority and commission of the chief priests. About noon, O King, I was on the road. I saw light from heaven, brighter than the sun, blazing around me and my companions. We all fell to the ground. I heard a voice saying to me in Aramaic, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? It is hard for you to kick against the goads. Then I asked, who are you, Lord? I'm Jesus, whom you're persecuting. The Lord replied, now get up and stand on your feet. I have appeared to you to appoint you as a servant and a witness of what you have seen of me and what I will show you. I will rescue you from your own people and from the Gentiles. I am sending you to them to open their eyes, and turn them from darkness to light, from the power of Satan to God, so that they may receive forgiveness of sins and a place among those who are sanctified by faith in me. So that's basically Paul saying, this is how I came to Jesus.
I was going to say, his testimony is a lot more powerful than everybody's.
Yeah. There's only one like that in Scripture. I know I was going to go to kill some Christians, and this light showed up. And a voice came to me. I was blind. It was crazy. Yeah. Yours is going to be probably a slower... well, this person told me the gospel, and that person told me the gospel, and one day I thought, whoa, they're right. The third component is Paul's life after Christ. So then, King Agrippa, I was not disobedient to the vision from heaven. So I heard the gospel, I obeyed, right? First to those in Damascus, then to those in Jerusalem and all Judea, to the Gentiles also I preached that they should repent, turn to God, prove their repentance by their deeds. That's why the Jews seized me in the temple courts and tried to kill me. But I have had God's help to this very day, and so I stand here to testify to small and great alike. I am saying nothing beyond what the prophets and Moses said would happen, that the Christ would suffer, and as the first to rise from the dead would proclaim light to his own people and to the Gentiles. So, his life before Christ, how he came to Christ, what he did, what that changed in his life, how he's living now. Now I'm going around telling her about Jesus, right? And then he ends with a question to the king. He says, King Agrippa, do you believe the prophets? I know you do. Then Agrippa said to Paul, do you think in such a short time you can persuade me to be a Christian? So basically he's sending the invitation out like, so what do you think? Where are you at? Are you ready to follow Jesus? And that's maybe the critical part we often miss. We can tell our story, but it should always end with, where do you think? Where are you at with that? Are you tracking with this? You know, is this something that maybe you could use in your life? Paul had a unifying theme through a story. That's kind of as you get your story down, you might change the theme depending on who you're talking to, because you're observing their life and what angle they're coming from. You might say something slightly different to a homeless person that you might say to an executive of a Fortune 500 company. You know, it's the same gospel story before how you change and after, but the theme might be different. His theme was his zeal. In the beginning, he had a zeal for God. That's what led him against Christians. And he came to Christ and he had a zeal to serve God afterwards. It was a redirected zeal. You know, it's like, now I got to start a church. I got to tell everybody. I got to tell everybody about Jesus. So that was kind of his theme in this particular setting. All right, so this is where you have to put some personal thought in. Writing your story. And I would encourage you to jot some thoughts down. I could have given you more space maybe, but I don't know, there's paper around. Writing your story before Christ. Where were you spiritually before you became a Christian? How was that affecting you? What was your life like, your attitudes, actions, relationships, all this stuff? You've heard me say that before on Sundays, like, oh, okay, I was only in, fourth grade, but still I was a thief, I was shoplifting, I was vulgar, I was like, parents kept their children away from me because I was teaching them words. That was just my story. That's who I was, what I did, So spend some time thinking about, okay, what was my life like before I knew Jesus? And then what caused you to begin considering Christ? For me, it was a chipping away of, I knew how I was living was incorrect. Really, should I be going into stores every day to steal something just because? That seemed kind of weird. Do I need to speak language that I knew was offensive to people? I did it because I thought it was funny. I liked teaching kids new words, and I knew I'd get them in trouble. And somewhere in there, I started picking away little pieces of a Sunday school lesson that would stick out to me, something that Mom would say, all those things. Then you hit to your conversion. What moment when the light bulb came on? Well, my life was empty. My things were not working right. My marriage collapsed. I got fired from my job. Whatever it was, it could have been it just dawned. Like, wow, it just seems so true. Whatever it was, maybe not a bright light, but an internal light that you saw. That. And then what'd you do? What'd you do about that? And then that transition to after Christ, how did you begin to change? I never stole again. The hardest part for me was learning a different language. That naturally things would just roll out of my mouth, and I had to learn to curb that and say different things. That was just part of my convictions and how the Holy Spirit was leading me. And then what benefits have you experienced since becoming a Christian? Relationship. I know how to do marriage better, whatever. Going to heaven, my work ethic's different, whatever it is. Think that stuff through, and that becomes your story. Thoughts? It's super simple, but you have to think it out. You have to really write it out and think about it and process it.
You addressed this somewhat, but you used the example of your daughters that grew up, probably never having questioned their belief in Christ. And so there was not so much a specific incident of conversion from what, that they always had that foundation.
Yeah, I kind of talked them through this, as they were young too, well, what's my story? It's well, you grew up in a family of faith, so you've been surrounded with Scripture, you've gone to church your whole life, but at some point, that faith became theirs. It wasn't ours. It wasn't, we just do this as a family. It was I personally believe in Jesus Christ. It's what dawned on you to realize it wasn't just what Mom and Dad do, or what I grew up doing, but I really, really believe this. And this can be a little different for everybody, I think. Part of that was experiencing life with their peers and seeing how their friends were living and going, I just don't want that for my future. And it just didn't gel well, it just didn't look attractive to them. And I should I don't know, I should ask them. It's been a few years we've had that conversation, like what was it that clicked? Because both of them had the moment where they're just like, oh no, this is real. This isn't just what we do, you know.
I think they saw their friends, you know. I don't know, maybe you said that and I was reading something, but I just remember them talking a lot about, okay, how would you do life? Like, you know, they'd often say that their friends' parents were giving them certain advice on something, and then they'd come and talk to us and say, how could a parent do that? You know, like, why would they say that to their child, you know?
Yeah.
It's just like questioning about that. It's like, wow, we're so grateful that we don't have, you know, to worry about that. We're not getting that advice from our parents. We're getting, you know, it's just some of that foundational stuff.
Yeah.
Saved from.
Yeah, what I was gonna, I don't know, but I know Brenda's family grew up in church. When I didn't grow up in the church other than, you know, Roman Catholic, Easter, maybe Christmas. But when did you realize you were a sinner? When did you realize you were actually in a prison and that you needed someone to get you out of that? That's how I'm thinking about it here.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know exactly when that conversion happened for me. Other than the multiple times I would watch TV and, do you want Jesus, you know, into your life? Do you want something better for yourself in this? Yeah. You know,
Yeah, right.
You know, your spirit rises up. Yeah, I don't. But you didn't really realize I was in a prison.
Yeah.
And years later realized that that's exactly where I was, right? And we all make those prisons.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if that isn't part of that, where your realization is that, what am I doing? What am I doing? This is hurting myself, my family, me, you know.
Yeah.
I'm tired of hurting other people.
That's exactly what it was for me when I had that ice cream bar stuffed up my sleeve and I'm walking out the door going, why? I just knew it violated scripture, but I didn't care. But all of a sudden I cared. Yeah. And I don't know that it was the light bulb moment, just not on the road to Damascus, but it was on the road to Clear Lake.
Yeah, because some people, when you talk about this, their stories, they think that I don't have a story, Brenda. I don't have much of a story, you know. And some people have big stories, you know. I'm in prison, you know, and I've done this and that.
Yeah.
But every one of those stories, even though no matter how small, they all have the same thing. They're all in a prison.
Yeah.
Right, and a prison that they created,
Yeah.
a cell, and they need someone to get them out.
Yeah.
And there's only one person to get you out.
Because we've all sinned, you know. Yeah, like you say, it doesn't matter if I'm an alcoholic and lost everything and a gambling addict, whatever, or I said that one word once. You know, it's all sin separates from God. Maybe if you've lived, you know, the good life, you still you rebelled somewhere, said something, lied. You know, how many sins does it take to separate one? You know, well, we've all done that. And it's that realization that, well, I really am a sinner. It's a pride thing, breaking through the pride of I do need something.
And we're talking about people that realize, and then there's people out there that don't realize it, like Job, right? Where he's a righteous man, but yet he's doing it for potentially some of the wrong reasons, right? So you can be righteous and you can be a righteous sinner and a sinner.
Right.
But you're still apart from God.
Romans 1, 2, 3. All the Jews are like, yeah, those Gentiles, they're awful. They're doing all that stuff. And he goes, oh, by the way, you too.
That's right.
Because you're doing the same stuff. Just clean it up a little bit. Yeah.
That's how I kind of related to like some of the people that, I've gone to church my whole life.
But they're in that Stockholm syndrome where they think everything's good.
That's,
Yeah.
it's
They think everything's good.
and
in
that's
life,
some of the people that have the hardest time coming to Christ because they think they're already there.
Yeah.
You know, I was just, when I was writing my little notes, you know, and I thought, it's interesting that my story is like Brenda's, sort of. I mean, my family wasn't Christian really, but my best friend's family was. And so I was always over there and always doing stuff. But my turning point when I wrote it down, I thought, that's so interesting. It wasn't sin, it was fear. That was what my thing was. So I have always had this little thing about death. I just, I don't know if I was traumatized by something when I was little or what happened, but I don't do funerals well, I don't do death well, none of that stuff. And so when we studied as a young person about what happens after you die, for me it was eternity stuff that, you know, so that was the connection that, so I think that's probably the issue is like, there's so many different stories out there. Yeah, so a person like me that's, you know, I mean, my own personal family, there was issues, divorce and all that stuff that happened there. But I had, you know, a best friend who I was consistently going to church with. And so I just kind of didn't live that life with them. You know, my family was doing their thing and then I was like over here. So I sort of feel like I grew up in a Christian family, but they weren't my family, you know?
Vicariously.
But I could give a more of a, I have a little connection with somebody who might say they're scared of, you know, even though I haven't really, I mean, I sin and everything like everybody does, but I didn't have that thing.
You didn't be full on rebellion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, but yet, when I wrote it down, I thought, I think that might be the first time I've ever really realized that that's kind of the thing that made me go, oh, I don't want to die without God. So I guess this is what I need to do, so now I need to live it, you know, so that when the end comes, I'm there. That was the fear thing that got me, you know, so. I think that's why anybody who would say, well, everybody has their own story. You know, it is what, you know, maybe I wasn't locked in that prison, but I guess I was, fear, you know. But I was a young child, so childlike fear of like what happens after you die kind of thing. And, but just kind of interesting. So there's a story. Everybody has one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, and I've had that. I remember whenever I was younger, I had a fear of dying also.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right after we got married, I had a terrible something happened. I don't know. It's just, you know.
It shook you. I remember that, but I don't
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
what it was.
Life.
Yeah,
And
the
then-
depth of life, yeah.
Yeah, it just gets heavy sometimes.
Huh.
Life goes by so fast and stuff. Sometimes lines are blurred, and for me, I don't know what the exact moment is of when everything. Exactly, you know, I really rough childhood. Then I started with my grandparents. They took me to church, but then like I wasn't really educated on what it really meant.
Uh-huh.
So that's why I got baptized.
Get
here
religious.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause I didn't know what it meant, and then, you know, I went off in my life and with that thinking, you know, but then I was still screwing up. And then it's not until my life slowed down, really, after I got out of the military, when I moved here, where everything got really serious. And I kind of started seeing things for what they were, I guess. I don't know, it's just, my life's been, I had a discussion like earlier this week with him, like, ever since like high school, I've been going, and it's like, not till I moved here and then it kind of settled down,
Yeah.
everything started to kind of become clear, I guess. I don't know. It's kind of weird.
Well, a transition in a life like that, you start thinking like, well, how many transitions do I have left? I mean, you
But
know.
life goes by so quick, and I had to grow up really early. You know,
Yeah,
with
yeah.
me, and like if you don't have the education, you know, and the church matters too, really, it does. The church matters. We went to church in Washington, you know, every Sunday, usually, but then we stopped going. You know, it's just like, there was nothing keeping us to come back, but this church is different. It just,
Yeah.
I feel it
We're
here.
different, all
People
right.
care.
Yeah.
You go to places, churches that you don't feel the care at all. There's no care.
Yeah. Well, the church that we did care about, it was just there wasn't anything. This has more stuff to do, like all the time.
Service work and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, it just keeps you involved. And being in the military too, you know, I'd go out and see, come back, and then, you know, you have that break, and then you kind of wouldn't, so that kind of always back in and out, in and out, and out, that kind
That
of
doesn't
interrupted
help
the
either,
flow
does it?
too, so.
Yeah, when I mean service work, not work, it's service, you have a opportunity to help others serve, and by serving, a lot of places don't have that. So that, you know, that need for you to give back is not being met.
And from doing my little thing, like, where is that? My top, where, I don't know where it's at anymore, my top thing, oh, here it is, was serving.
Uh-huh.
So obviously that was me, and I wasn't getting that from.
Connected well with all the stuff we do that serves.
Yeah, but my other churches I went to, we were getting that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I had a thought fly through my mind and all of that. Well, so a lot of this is something you can kind of work on your own. I would encourage you to actually sit down and write out some thoughts. Somewhere on here, do I have a thing that says like circle some key words in there and kind of put it together in a paragraph? Because that's your basic story. You can use that, you know, in an elevator in 20 seconds. You can use it if you're given a big presentation somewhere and you need to, it's the same story, you just spread it out and add more details, you know. But it's important to have that down. And you're not like making stuff up, it's your actual story. I mean, make sure it's real and it's genuine. Because I think, like you mentioned, when Paul's conversion were like, well, that big bright light. But I think we did all have that. It was just not as obvious. We didn't actually literally maybe hear the voice and, get blinded. But there was something that, was at the time? All right. There was something that made you decide to, like, we're going to check this church out. Both of you guys were about the same time, within a month, wasn't it, of each other? Just happened to be like, okay, we'll go here. That was a pivotal time in your life and in your development spiritual walk, which is pretty cool. So that just shows all the stuff you did before wasn't meaningless. It was God. It was that process. God was putting people in your life, getting you here, getting you there, to the point of the light bulb came on, and now it's more real, so it's cool to be part of that story. That's why I think it's so cool when we go to Africa and we see all these people convert and change, and you're just like, I don't know what happened before, but something, there's, maybe years of those little bits and pieces in their life. And I'm hoping now if we start, the idea of this is to have in our story, so we go to these homeless camps and someone asks a question, you can say, oh man, I used to do the same thing. I used to do blah, 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 blah. God helped me in that. And when I have questions, well, how in the world did he help you? Well, that's a good question. And so that's the idea. Think through your response so that it's not like, dumbfounded. One of my most embarrassing moments in my life is back in college when I was working at a place called Library Binding, and I don't know, it doesn't matter the whole context, but we're working on these folders things, and there's a guy from Laos sitting there next to me, and we're just talking, and he goes, well, tell me about this Jesus. And I thought, well, that's like a Bible college student's, dream. So I get into Abraham and Isaac. I went into this big exhortation, and at the time I thought, I don't know why I'm saying all of this stuff. I'm not answering his question. He asked me about Jesus, and, well, let me tell you the whole entire history that led to the Messiah, and it was a total flop and terrible thing, and because I hadn't really thought about my story. I just, let me tell you the intellectual side that I'm not very good at. Try to be someone I'm not. Trying to be a professor that I must have heard. And so, yeah, I've learned to simplify and not trying to impress anybody. We're not trying to sell anything. That's where I think Christians, we get a little bit overly aggressive, which we give ourselves a bad name. We honestly want people to go to heaven. That's what we want. But it comes down as a judgment. Like you have to understand you have sin before you'll seek for forgiveness. So sometimes we point out sin so much that we're just trying to make people feel bad or something. I don't know, it's some subconscious thing, but it's out of a good motive. But I mean, none of us respond to that. You know, you're an idiot, you're a fool, you're a failure. And you're like, well, I don't think I want to talk to you. You know, so be careful how you communicate, because their goal is for forgiveness. That's what Paul's said about it. What did he say? It's this last thing. Verse 23, proclaim light to his people as a Gentile. I mean, he wanted to bring forgiveness to the people. One of those verses. I got too many papers here. And that's all we want. You know, we're not trying to grow a church. I mean, that comes naturally, but we're not trying to make a mark. We just want people to go to heaven.
One of the things that I realized is this last homeless, we were all sitting around talking. The homeless people were talking amongst themselves. And once in a while, it would be a relation. You know, we would get something into them that if a lot of these people are in their own heads, right?
Yeah,
And they live right here, and their relationship is here, and maybe with that other person there, right? It's not necessarily with you.
Yeah.
And I know one of the reasons why we're also doing this, and we go every week, is to break through that so that they can, instead of looking at each other and themselves, they look at you, and then they're ready to receive some information. Otherwise, they're not hearing anything.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
because we've sat there and we were talking to them, they don't hear nothing.
Yeah.
Because they're too busy in their head and with these people.
Yeah.
So
or they're looking at that burger.
We're trying to
you
break,
know.
yeah. We've got to talk about that too, yeah, but, that threw me off because, yeah, that wasn't necessarily what they were talking about, but, is to break through that. That's the reason why we're going there every week, is to break through, to actually make a connection with these people, so then we can give them, you know, so we can share with them. Otherwise, we're not sharing with them.
Yeah.
You know, when they're in here, nothing else gets through, right?
It's the long game.
Exactly, it's a long game.
And we get to choose.
Yep.
They get to choose. If they don't want Jesus, they get to choose that. That's sad, you know, but we can't force anybody.
No.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said relationships. That's what everybody needs, is that relationship. You need to continue the relationship
Yeah.
to make it work.
Yeah.
Because if you just go there once
Yep.
and then you never come back again, or never keep going, it's just gonna fall off.
Yeah, if you quit trying to reach them, you know, this relationship, to have a relationship with you first, so that you can mention that relationship. Hey, I got a relationship with Jesus.
Yeah.
And they're not, like you said, it's their choice, and hopefully you can go back, we can continue to go back. They see the same faces, then they might turn around. I liken it to a squirrel in a tree that I've got these squirrels, and they all chitter chatter with each other, and they look at each other. They're not concerned about us. But once in a while, you'll get one, feed him a nut, and next time you come out the door, he will look at you, and he will want, you know, there's a relationship building there. And it took a while. They come in, they take them from your hands. Because we built a relationship, and that's what I clicked on when we were talking. So
Yeah.
That's all it is.
this people, we gotta go there long enough to get that relationship, show them that we're loving them, right?
But at the same time, we all need the relationship too.
Exactly.
And that's why, like I said, the church matters, because if you don't have a relationship in the church,
That's right,
like we do here, you're not gonna come back.
yeah.
That's the biggest point of having a church.
Yeah.
You just need that family. you need that
Community,
relationship.
yeah.
I want to go out on a limb here. When we go to the homeless camps, don't compare the homeless people to squirrels.
You remind me of a squirrel in my backyard.
I was gonna also say, when you give your story, you might not wanna say, yeah, well, I smoke crack too.
Yeah.
That's not.
Or maybe you did. I mean,
But no, this is the reason why I say, look, if we relate it to, because I relate it to being in a prison, and I created, locked up, I think that most everybody can relate to that. No matter if you smoke crack, or,
that's an important thing that I maybe didn't get in here. You know, you can so much glorify your before Christ that it just sounded like, well, why did you give all that fun up? You know, I'm not sure you've left it.
yeah,
Really. I mean, I've sat through testimonies before, you know, about the drugs and the alcohol and the sex and all this stuff, and people are talking to teens, and the teens are all going, man, that sounds fun, you know, and then they said, now you could be like me and be angry at a church, you know, like, I don't know if that works. You know, there's got to be a clear cut. This is what it used to be. Jesus came in and forgave me and gave me a new life, and I am a different person now. This is my past. That died here. It died. It's dead. And if that's not clearly communicated, that gets confusing. And that's why you got to think about your story.
What are some of the things that relate us to the old life to the new life? Or the old life is, like you were saying, we didn't care. We went in there and we stole that object. We didn't think twice about it. But the next time we did, we had this thought, why am I doing this? This is not right.
Yeah.
I think they can relate to that part of it.
Yeah.
It's not glorifying the stealing. You know, you can say, you know, I realized that this was wrong. I shouldn't be doing, you know, this is in my heart, right?
Yeah. That's my longer version of my story is, you know, in my stealing time, I stole a copy of the Ten Commandments, and then I would read it, and then I was stealing things. I thought one of the Ten Commandments is do not steal. I mean, so that was part of the, you know, at some point I thought, but I'm doing it. I'm breaking the commandment. Like I'm literally breaking one of the top 10 commandments. And so that was a turning point, you know, and then there was my Sunday school teacher saying, hi, Dad, you know, and I'm like, everything came together, and I'm like, oh, crap. You know?
Start putting Bibles in Amazon packages for those sports pirates.
Yeah.
So say that again.
Put Bibles in the Amazon.
Oh, put Bibles, okay.
Amazon package for the sports pirates. You just put a Bible out there, and then I open up, it's a Bible.
Like, oh,
Seeds. Seeds.
We thought we lost one of our suitcases in Africa busted open, and that was what was inside, was the Bibles, and so I miscounted, and I thought, you know what, I was one short of what was in there.
yeah.
And so we were like, oh no, we lost the Bible, and it was like, well, somebody finds it.
Somebody will read it. They'll get to the right place.
However, I had miscounted it, they were all there, so person didn't get it after all.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. So whenever you order anything from Amazon, make sure you order a Bible with your order.
I have thought about just using one of our Amazon boxes and just leaving it out front, just put something in it.
Yeah.
You know, take the good stuff out, and just to disappoint someone, but that's even better, give them a Bible.
Have you really had any problems?
I haven't, but you see it so much on you know, Facebook and on the Ring and stuff.
We've had people pull up, didn't we, when we had our credit stolen?
Yeah, I'm good at praise.
Remember, there was people that ordered stuff and it come delivered to our door, and we
Yeah,
had
they
people
were
driving
sending
by
us stuff that we hadn't ordered, and it's just, how
to
does that
sit,
scam?
yeah, to sit on your.
Stole a credit card or something.
Yeah.
All right, we better pray.